David Hilbert was a German mathematician of the 19th and 20th centuries. He discovered, as well as developed, fundamental ideas in all areas of mathematics, which included invariant theory, algebraic number theory, mathematical physics, the foundations of geometry, where he's considered to have had the greatest influence since Euclid, and the foundations of mathematics, where he is known as one of the founders of proof theory and mathematical logic. Hilbert was born on January 23, 1862, in the province of Prussia, Kingdom of Prussia. It is not clear whether he was born in Königsberg or Znamensk, but he ultimately grew up in Königsberg. He was the first child of Otto Hilbert and Maria Therese Ertmann. Otto was the son of a judge who was a high-ranking privy councillor and became a judge himself. He lived his life by a standard pattern, like walking the same route every day, and only leaving Königsberg once a year for family holiday. So it's no surprise that he ended up being quite strict with Hilbert. Maria came from a family of merchants and was fascinated by philosophy, astronomy, and prime numbers. Thus, it's believed she had quite an impact on how Hilbert's interests were shaped. Both parents were of Protestant faith, with Otto being especially devoted. While it was common for kids to start attending school at age 6, Hilbert didn't attend until age 8, so his mother probably taught him at home until then. At age 8, he began attending the Collegium Fridericianum in a junior program for 2 years before officially entering the school in 1872 at the age of 10. This school was regarded as one of the best in Königsberg, but the emphasis of the education was on language, like Latin and Greek. So mathematics and science alike ended up mostly hitting the back burner. The approach to learning at the school was to memorize large amounts of material, and Hilbert was rather poor at this. Thus, he did not really shine in the school and was not very happy there. 7 years after entering the school, in September 1979, he transferred to the Wilhelm Gymnasium, which had far more of an emphasis on mathematics and was in much better spirits. Here, he received phenomenal scores, and it was stated in a final report that, for mathematics, he always showed a very lively interest and a penetrating understanding. He mastered all the material taught in the school in a very pleasing manner, and was able to apply it with sureness and ingenuity. In early 1880, Hilbert graduated from Wilhelm, and almost immediately enrolled for study at the University of Königsberg to study mathematics and obtain his PhD. While studying at the university, Hilbert made 2 very notable friends who earned their PhDs at the university as well. Hermann Minkowski, a primarily 19th century German mathematician who is notable for creating and developing the geometry of numbers, and Adolf Hurwitz, a 19th and 20th century German mathematician notable for his work in algebra, analysis, geometry, and number theory. These 3 pushed each other to reach great mathematical heights. The first semester at Königsberg, Hilbert took courses in integral calculus, the theory of determinants, and the curvature of surfaces. His second semester, he studied at Heidelberg University, attending lectures given by Lazarus Fuchs, a German mathematician notable for his contributions to linear differential equations. Upon returning to Königsberg the next semester, Hilbert attended lectures given by Heinrich Weber, a German mathematician primarily of the 19th century, who was notable for his work in algebra, number theory, and analysis. The lectures Hilbert sat in on were for the theory of functions and number theory. In 1883, Ferdinand von Liedemann, a 19th and 20th century German mathematician who was notable for his proof that pi is a transcendental number, was appointed a position at the University of Königsberg to replace Weber, and Lindemann ended up becoming Hilbert's thesis advisor. In December of 1884, Hilbert received an oral examination for his PhD thesis. Lindemann had suggested Hilbert study invariant properties of certain algebraic forms, and those proctoring were impressed by Hilbert's great originality. He devised an approach that Lindemann had not conceived of. Minkowski commented after reading the thesis, "I studied your work with great interest and rejoiced over all the processes which the poor invariants had to pass through before they managed to disappear. I would not have supposed that such a good mathematical theorem could have been obtained in Königsberg." In February of 1885, Hilbert went through the final stage of his doctorate, passing with flying colors. After receiving his doctorate, he spent the month after taking and passing the Staatsexamen, which was an exam that allows you to teach in schools. Hurwitz, when discussing topics to research, suggested Hilbert make a visit to Felix Klein, a German mathematician who is notable for his work in group theory, complex analysis, and non-Euclidean geometry. Hilbert ended up going to visit him in Leipzig, attending some of Klein's lectures. It was here that he was introduced to Eduard Study, a German mathematician known for his work in invariant theory of ternary forms, as well as spherical trigonometry. Klein instructed the pair to go and visit Paris to discuss invariant theory, giving suggestions on which Parisian mathematicians to speak with, which included Henri Poincaré, Camille Jordan, and Charles Hermite, who was apparently extraordinarily friendly and hospitable when they spoke with him. After making his way back to Königsberg in the spring of 1886, Hilbert prepared to submit his habilitation paper on invariant theory so he could lecture at the University of Königsberg. Klein tried warning Hilbert that Königsberg may be a rough place to submit his habilitation, but Hilbert wasn't concerned and ended up becoming staff there for the next 9 years. He was a Privatdozent until 1892, becoming an extraordinary professor for 1 year before being appointed to a full professor in 1893. About 2 years after he began working at the University of Königsberg, he went on a mathematical tour to get as much exposure to cutting-edge mathematics as he could. He first visited Berlin, meeting Leopold Kronecker, a 19th century German mathematician, notable for his work in number theory and algebra, as well as his heavy criticism of George Cantor, and Karl Weierstrass, a 19th century German mathematician, often cited as the father of modern analysis. Next, Hilbert visited Leipzig, where he met Paul Gordon, a primarily 19th century mathematician who was the leading expert on invariant theory at the time. The last visit was to Göttingen, presumably to talk mathematics with Klein, who had accepted a professorship at the University of Göttingen 2 years prior, Göttingen being one of the world's strongest research centers at the time. Klein had wanted Hilbert to work in Göttingen for quite a few years, and in 1895, he successfully got Hilbert hired as the chair of mathematics at the University of Göttingen, where he would stay for the rest of his career. In 1902, the University of Berlin offered Hilbert their chair, but he declined after persuading Göttingen to set up another mathematics chair for Minkowski. While at Göttingen, Hilbert surrounded himself with some of the most important mathematicians of the 20th century, which included Ernst Zermelo, a German logician who made fundamental contributions to the foundation of mathematics, most notably Zermelo-Fraenkel axiomatic set theory, John von Neumann, a Hungarian-American mathematician and physicist, most notable for his contributions to the creation of the atom bomb, and was an assistant to Hilbert at one point, Emmy Noether, a German mathematician, notable for her fundamental contributions to abstract algebra, and Hilbert defending her against the rampant misogyny she was facing from other academicians, and Alonzo Church, an American logician notable for his immense contributions to mathematical logic and the foundations of theoretical computer science. Hilbert had a total of 69 PhD students that he mentored, among them being Hermann Weyl, a German mathematician and physicist notable for his contributions to number theory, and Felix Bernstein, most notable for proving the Schroeder-Bernstein theorem, a central result in set theory. Let's now discuss some of Hilbert's contributions. Hilbert's work on invariant functions led to a proof of the finite basis theorem. 20 years earlier, Paul Gordon had demonstrated the theorem of finiteness of generators for binary forms using a complex computational approach. Many mathematicians tried and failed to generalize the result, and Hilbert came to the conclusion that a different path needed to be taken for generalization. He took the path of showing the existence of a finite set of generators for invariance of quantics for any number of variables, a quantic being a homogeneous polynomial with constant coefficients of degree n in m independent variables. His proof relied on the law of excluded middle and an infinite extension, with the law of excluded middle stating that for any proposition, either that proposition is true or its negation is true. The use of this law proved to be problematic in some schools of thought, such as constructivists, who vehemently opposed it, with Hilbert stating, taking the principle of excluded middle from the mathematician is the same as prohibiting the boxer the use of his fists. Hilbert sent his results to Mathematische Annalen, the leading mathematical journal at the time. Gordon was the main editor, and he ended up rejecting Hilbert's result, saying, "This is not mathematics, this is theology." Ultimately, Klein guaranteed to Hilbert it would in fact be published, and without any alterations, recognizing how powerful this result was. Klein's recognition motivated Hilbert to extend his method in a second article, providing estimates on the maximum degree of the minimum set of generators. Klein was so impressed with this, he told Hilbert, "Without doubt, this is the most important work on general algebra that the Annalen has ever published." After some time, Gordon relented his disapproval, saying, "I've convinced myself that even theology has its merits." In 1899, Hilbert published Foundations of Geometry, which he proposed a formal set of 21 axioms called Hilbert's axioms. They substitute the traditional Euclidean axioms, avoiding weaknesses identified in those of Euclid's. The axioms underwent quite a few changes from publication to publication, being finalized in the 7th edition. The axioms unified both plane geometry and solid geometry from Euclid into one system, and Hilbert's approach signaled the shift to modern axiomatization. In the work, he argued that the axioms are not taken as self-evident truths. Geometry may treat things, but it is not necessary to assign any explicit meaning to the undefined concepts. Elements such as point, line, plane, etc., could be substituted by other objects, like tables, chairs, glasses of beer, etc. It is their defined relationships that are discussed. In 1900, Hilbert introduces a list of 23 unsolved problems at the International Congress of Mathematicians in Paris, and this is generally considered the most successful and deeply considered compilation of open problems ever to be produced by one mathematician. It was pivotal in shaping mathematics as we know it in the 20th century. While giving his speech, Hilbert emphasized that what he produced was merely a sample of problems, and there definitely existed other very important problems that didn't make it in the list. A huge amount of work has been put forth to solve these problems, with some being solved in just a few years, others taking far more time, and then some which have yet to be solved. Some of the greatest unsolved problems on the list are the continuum hypothesis, which states there is no set whose cardinality is strictly between that of the integers and the real numbers. Goldbach's conjecture, which states that every even integer greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 primes. And the Riemann hypothesis, which states that every non-trivial zero of the Riemann zeta function has real part 1/2. The problem list paved the way for the development of the formalist school, with formalist thought being that mathematics is a manipulation of symbols according to agreed-upon formal rules, thus an autonomous activity of thought. Hilbert created Hilbert's program in 1920, which led to this movement. He wanted mathematics to be formulated on a solid and complete logical foundation, believing in principle that this could be done by showing all of mathematics follows from a correctly chosen finite system of axioms, and that some such axioms of systems are probably consistent through some means, such as epsilon calculus. So why did Hilbert embark on this venture? Besides wanting a stronger, more rigorous backing to mathematics, he also was trying to fight the popular philosophical view at the time of the ignorabimus, the idea that scientific knowledge is limited, which was an active issue in German thought. He actually wrote in 1919 that, "We are not speaking here of arbitrariness in any sense. Mathematics is not like a game whose tasks are determined by arbitrarily stipulated rules. Rather, it is a conceptual system possessing internal necessity that can only be so and by no means otherwise." Alas, Hilbert's program fell apart once Kurt Gödel's incompleteness theorem was published in 1931. Gödel, being an Austro-Hungarian logician, considered one of the most significant logicians to have ever lived. Gödel's incompleteness ultimately showed that any non-contradictory formal system cannot demonstrate its completeness by way of its own axioms. Hilbert's program, though unsuccessful, did bring about major achievements in proof theory, like clarifying consistency as it relates to theories of central concern to mathematics, steering logic on the course of classification, the development of recursion theory, and then mathematical logic as an autonomous discipline in the 30s. Hilbert was predominantly a pure mathematician until 1912. His friend Minkowski kept trying to push Hilbert more and more towards physics, succeeding in at least getting Hilbert to study on his own for some time and attend some lectures. He began with kinetic gas theory, moving to elementary radiation theory, and the molecular theory of matter. By 1912, Hilbert was almost solely studying physics. In the summer of 1915, Hilbert's interest in physics focused on general relativity, so he invited Einstein to Göttingen to deliver a week of lectures on the subject. Einstein had been vigorously working on the field equations, and once he found out Hilbert was also working on them, he redoubled his own efforts. In November of that year, Einstein published several papers which encompassed the field equations of gravitation. Independently, Hilbert published The Foundations of Physics, which was an axiomatic derivation of the field equations. Given much of the problems over first findings that had been going on with Einstein, Hilbert fully credited him as the originator of the theory, avoiding any disputes. Hilbert was also highly influential on quantum mechanics, with the use of Hilbert spaces, which are complete abstract vector spaces possessing the structure of an inner product that allows length and angle to be measured. Complete meaning that there are enough limits in the space to allow the techniques of calculus to be used. Von Neumann, in 1926, showed that if quantum states were understood as vectors in a Hilbert space, they would correspond with Schrödinger's wave function theory and Heisenberg's matrices. Hilbert found much of the mathematics that physicists used to be sloppy. Though they needed to use rather advanced mathematics to prove their theory, much of it came off as hard to understand due to poor exposition. So he embarked on a quest to develop coherent mathematical theory for what he found, being quoted as saying, "Physics is too hard for physicists." Ricard Courant found these contributions to be so important that he added Hilbert as a co-author to his work, Methods of Mathematical Physics, published in 1924, even though Hilbert didn't directly contribute. Now talking a bit about Hilbert more personally, he was baptized and raised as a Calvinist in the Prussian Evangelical Church. He later left the church, becoming agnostic, and argued that mathematical truth was independent of the existence of God or any other a priori assumptions. Hilbert married his second cousin, Kita Jarosz, on October 12, 1892. Jarosz was the daughter of a Königsberg merchant. She was quite outspoken, having an independence that matched Hilbert's own. The pair had one child together in 1893, named Franz. Franz suffered from an unknown mental illness his entire life, and his inferior intellect was a terrible disappointment to Hilbert. It was also a matter of distress to mathematicians and students at Göttingen, who would presumably hope for a strong mathematical lineage to be carried forward with Franz. Despite how Hilbert felt towards Franz, he was known to be astoundingly friendly. When he first arrived as a new professor at Göttingen, he upset the older professors by going to the local billiard hall and playing with people who were junior to him. He worshipped many of his students and made it a point to go on walks with them, talking informally about mathematical problems. He considered Minkowski to be his best and truest friend, so with Minkowski's death in 1909, this could explain why Hilbert got even more invested in physics than he already had been, to carry on Minkowski's torch, if you will. In 1925, Hilbert developed pernicious anemia, a vitamin deficiency whose primary symptom is fatigue. Sadly, it was untreatable at the time. Eugene Wigner, a Hungarian-American physicist who received the Nobel Prize in Physics for his contributions to the theory of atomic nucleus and the elementary particles, and also an assistant to Hilbert, described Hilbert as subject to enormous fatigue and how he seemed quite old. Even after being diagnosed and treated, Wigner described him as hardly a scientist after 1925, and certainly not a Hilbert. Given this unfortunate illness, he retired from research in 1930, still serving as the editor for Mathematische Annalen until 1939, a role which he'd taken up in 1902, and he still gave the occasional lecture until 1934. His last bit of lecturing was during the winter semester from 1933 to 1934, giving a lecture a week on the foundations of geometry. When he was done teaching, he never stepped foot within an academic institution for the remainder of his days, 100% due to the rise of the Nazi Party. Hilbert witnessed many of the prominent faculty at Groningen get purged from the university due to this rise, all of whom left for other countries. So despite becoming an honorary citizen of Königsberg upon retirement, and still living with his wife and son, the end of his life was quite sad and lonely. In early 1942, Hilbert fell and broke his arm while walking in Groningen, making him almost completely inactive, and seems to be a major factor in his death a year after the incident. He died on February 14, 1943 at the age of 81 in Groningen, survived by his wife and son. He was also buried in Groningen, but due to basically all of Hilbert's friends and coworkers having left Germany, only about 10 people attended his funeral.
Dang.
Well, there you have it, a brief history of David Hilbert, a remarkably influential mathematician and a man who was forever optimistic about the future of human culture and science. I'll lend you on a quote from him regarding the ignorabimus school of thought that dominated during his time. "We must not believe those who today, with philosophical bearing and superior tone, prophesy the decline of culture and accept the ignorabimus principle. For us, there is no ignorabimus, and in my opinion, none at all in natural science. Rather than this foolish ignorabimus, our slogan shall be, we must know, we will know." I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time.
So yeah, David Hilbert is very, very much an influential person that I keep hearing about. Let's see. He's trying to bring this up. Okay. All right, so when I say I mean like 2 or 3 times I looked at this Wikipedia article about Hilbert's problems, and they're just so I guess interesting. Just seemed like a very, very advanced, obviously, math, some of which are resolved. Like, dang, someone hit something out of the park with this green resolution to some of these things. And it's just a great way to dive into so much of the magic of math. So here Terrence Tao saying Hilbert's one of the greatest general purpose mathematicians, like a very generalist mathematician who created this general list of 24 problems, some of which got solved by some brilliant soul. So I think that's it for this video.